The transport shuttle shook as it passed through the massive energy shield protecting Nexus Prime. Jake Morrison gripped his seat and watched through the small window as the Galactic Council's main station grew larger. The structure was huge, bigger than any human city he had ever seen. Metal towers stretched in all directions, connected by tubes and bridges that sparkled with alien technology. Jake wore his best diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric was clean and pressed. Silver medals hung on his chest, each one earned through years of service to Earth. His short brown hair was neat, and his face showed the calm expression he had practiced for months. To anyone watching, he looked like a typical human diplomat. On his first big mission, they were wrong about the first mission part. They were also wrong about the typical part. The shuttle pilot, a four-armed alien called a Nexari, spoke without turning around. "First time to Nexus Prime, human."
Yes.
Jake replied. His voice was steady and polite. "You've picked a bad time to visit. Council is angry with your species. Very angry." The pilot's extra arms moved over the controls as he guided the shuttle toward a docking bay. "Maybe you should have stayed home." Jake said nothing. He had heard similar warnings during the 3-day journey to reach the station. Every alien he met seemed to think humans were in serious trouble. Most of them seemed happy about it. The shuttle landed with a soft bump. Jake gathered his single bag and walked toward the exit. The pilot watched him go with what might have been pity in his large yellow eyes. The docking bay was full of activity. Aliens of dozens of different species moved cargo, repaired ships, and conducted business. Jake had studied pictures of many of these species, but seeing them in person was different. Some were tall and thin with too many joints in their arms and legs. Others were short and covered in fur or scales. A few looked almost human, except for strange colors or extra eyes. None of them paid much attention to one. More human walking through their space, Jake found the transport platform that would take him to the diplomatic quarters. The ride took 15 minutes through corridors lined with shops, restaurants, and offices. He saw more alien species than he could count. The station housed millions of beings from across the galaxy, all working together under the authority of the Galactic Council. The human diplomatic quarters were smaller than he expected. Ambassador Lisa Carter met him at the entrance. She was a woman in her 40s with gray hair and tired eyes. Jake had read her file during the trip. She had been working on Nexus Prime for 2 years, trying to improve relations between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. "Captain Morrison," she said, shaking his hand, "welcome to the most frustrating assignment in human space." "Just Jake is fine," he replied. "I'm not military anymore." Lisa smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Right, diplomat now. Come on, I'll show you around." The human section had offices, meeting rooms, and living quarters for a staff of 12. Only 6 humans were currently on the station. The rest had been recalled to Earth. Over the past few months, as the political situation got worse, Lisa led him to a small conference room and closed the door. "How much did they tell you back on Earth?" "Enough," Jake said. "Trade agreements being broken. Attacks on human ships. The Council making threats. It's worse than that." Lisa sat down across from him. "They're planning something big. I've been here long enough to read the signs. Private meetings between species that usually hate each other, military ships gathering in systems near human space. They think we're weak." Jake nodded. He had suspected as much. What changed? 6 months ago, relations were improving. We did too well, too fast. Lisa pulled out a data pad and showed him shipping reports. Human technology is better than they expected. Our ships are faster, our weapons are more effective, our people are adapting to alien environments faster than anyone thought possible. She switched to another report. "The Cronin Empire lost a border dispute with one of our colonies last month. The Zephyrian Trade Union is losing profits because human merchants are offering better prices. 3 different species have asked the Council to limit human expansion, and the Council agreed. They're considering it. There's going to be a formal hearing tomorrow. You're here to represent Earth's position." Lisa leaned forward. "Jake, they're not planning to listen to anything." "You say this is for show?" They've already decided to put restrictions on human activity in this sector. Jake was quiet for a moment. He had expected political games, but this was worse than the briefings had suggested. What kind of restrictions? Trade limits, travel, permits, caps on how many colonies we can establish. Maybe even military observers on human worlds. Lisa's voice was bitter. They want to keep us small and controllable. That's not going to work. I know that. You know that. But they don't. They see humans as newcomers who got lucky with a few technological advances. They think we'll back down if they push hard enough. Jake stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, he could see alien ships coming and going from the station. Some were huge cargo vessels that could carry entire cities. Others were sleek warships with weapons that could destroy planets. All of them belonged to species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. "Have you met the main players?" he asked. "Unfortunately, yes." Lisa joined him at the window. "High Counselor Vexton leads the Zephyrian delegation. He's smart, ruthless, and he hates humans. War Speaker Gorthmal represents the Cronin Empire. He's not as smart as Vexton, but he's twice as violent. Between them, they control about 40% of the Council's votes." "What about our allies?" Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We don't have any real allies. A few species are neutral, but most of them are afraid to oppose the major powers. The Altarians like our trade agreements, but they won't risk a fight over them." Jake continued, looking out the window. His reflection stared back at him, showing a man in his mid-30s with steady brown eyes and scars on his hands that no diplomatic training could hide. "What's your read on station security?" The question seemed to surprise Lisa. "Security? It's tight. The Council Guard has about 5,000 troops stationed here, a mix of different species, but they're all professionals. Just curious about the setup." Jake turned away from the window. "Any restrictions on where I can go?" "The diplomatic quarter, the main council chambers, and the public areas. Everything else requires special permits." Lisa studied his face. "Jake, what did you really do before you became a diplomat?" He smiled, and for just a moment, something cold and dangerous flickered behind his polite expression. "I solve problems. For the Earth's government. It's usually the kind of problems that required a direct approach." Before Lisa could ask what that meant, an alarm chimed through the station's communication system. A smooth voice spoke in several languages, including English. "Attention all diplomatic personnel. And the council session scheduled for tomorrow has been moved to this evening. All representatives are required to attend." Lisa and Jake looked at each other. "That's not normal," she said. No, Jake agreed. "It's not." He picked up his bag and headed toward his assigned quarters. "I need to prepare for the meeting." "Ken, you briefed the rest of the staff?" "Of course." "Jake," Lisa called after him. "Be careful tomorrow. These people don't play fair." Jake paused in the doorway. "Neither do I." After he left, Lisa stood alone in the conference room, wondering what kind of diplomat Earth had really sent her. Something about Jake Morrison made her think of predators she had seen in nature documentaries. The kind that looked calm and peaceful, right up until they struck. She hoped the council was ready for what they had just brought down on themselves. Jake spent 2 hours in his quarters preparing for the evening session. His diplomatic bag contained more than just documents and data pads. Hidden in secret compartments were items that most diplomats never needed. A small medical kit with combat stims, emergency communication gear that could reach Earth's fleet command, and other tools that Jake hoped he would not have to use. He changed into his formal diplomatic robes, dark blue with silver trim that marked him as Earth's official representative. The outfit looked impressive, but Jake had made sure it allowed for full movement. And the cut gave him access to everything he might need in a hurry. A soft knock at his door interrupted his preparations. Lisa. Carter entered with 2 other humans. Jake recognized them from the files he had studied during his trip to Nexus Prime. "Jake, meet Kevin Brooks and Amy Walsh. They'll be your support team during the session." Lisa looked nervous. "I've been getting reports from my contacts around the station. Something big is happening." Kevin was a young man in his 20s with red hair and the eager look of someone new to interstellar politics. Amy was older, maybe 30, with dark skin and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Both wore junior diplomatic uniforms. What kind of reports? Jake asked. Military ships, Amy said. 3 Cronin battlecruisers just arrived. The Zephyrian fleet has been moving closer to the station all day. And there are rumors that other species are sending warships too. Kevin pulled out his datapad. I've been monitoring communication traffic. There's been a huge increase in encrypted messages between council member worlds. Whatever they're planning, it's coordinated. Jake nodded. The situation was developing exactly as he had expected. How many species are involved? At least 12. Lisa replied. Maybe more. The big question is whether they're planning to make their move during tonight's session or after. Tonight, Jake said with certainty. They moved the meeting time to catch us off guard. They want to present Earth with a finished decision and demand immediate compliance. Amy frowned. But that violates council procedures. Major policy changes require at least 48 hours notice to all affected parties. They don't care about procedures anymore. Jake checked his watch. They had 30 minutes before the session began. They think humans are too weak to fight back and too isolated to get help from other species. Yes. They're going to make an example of us. Lisa sat down heavily in one of the chairs. I've been afraid this would happen. The council has been testing human resolve for months. Every time we responded with diplomatic protests instead of military action, they became more confident. That was the plan, Jake said quietly. The 3 other humans stared at him. Bored. Plan, Kevin asked. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the alien ships moving around the station. Earth needed to know who our real enemies were. The only way to find out was to appear weak and see who tried to take advantage of us. You mean we've been letting them attack our ships on purpose? Amy's voice was sharp with anger. No, we've been responding exactly the way they expected us to respond. Diplomatic protests, economic sanctions, appeals to galactic law. Jake turned back to face them. What they don't know is that Earth has been preparing for this moment since the day we made contact with alien civilizations. Lisa stood up. Jake, what aren't you telling us? Before he could answer, the station's communication system activated. The same smooth voice from earlier spoke in multiple languages. All diplomatic representatives report to Council Chamber 1 immediately. Tonight's emergency session will begin in 15 minutes. Jake picked up his diplomatic case. Time to go. Stay close to me during the session. Don't say anything unless I tell you to. And whatever happens, don't panic. The corridor outside their quarters was busier than normal. Diplomatic delegations from dozens of species were heading toward the council chambers. Jake noticed that many of the aliens were carrying weapons, despite station regulations that prohibited arms in diplomatic areas. The council chamber was huge, with seating for representatives from over 100 species. Circular rows of seats surrounded a central platform where speakers addressed the assembly. The architecture was designed to make individual delegates feel small and isolated. Jake took his assigned position in the human section. Lisa, Kevin, and Amy sat behind him. Around the chamber, he could see the representatives of species that had been planning this moment for months. Their body language showed confidence and anticipation. High Counselor Vexen entered through the main doors. The Zephyrian was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His species had been one of the most vocal critics of human expansion into their region of space. Behind him walked Warspeaker Gorthmel, a massive creature, covered in dark fur with claws that could cut through metal. Other hostile delegates filed in after them. The Helix Confederacy, the Outer Rim Alliance, the Trade Federation of Centauri. Each group represented billions of beings who had decided that humanity was a threat to the established order. The Prime Arbiter, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council thousands of years ago, took his position at the center of the chamber. His voice carried easily through the large space without amplification. This emergency session is called to address the threat posed by human expansion in the galactic community. The Prime Arbiter's words were formal, but Jake could hear the The decision that had already been made. Recent events have shown that humanity lacks the wisdom and restraint necessary for full participation in civilized space. Vexton rose from his seat. Honored Arbiter. The Zephyrian Trade Union has documented 17 separate incidents where human merchants have used unfair advantages to damage established trade relationships. The Cronin Empire has similar concerns, Gorthmal rumbled. His voice was deep and threatening. Human colonies have refused to respect traditional territorial claims. They show no understanding of proper authority. One by one, the hostile species presented their complaints. Human technology was too advanced. Human expansion was too fast. Human diplomatic responses were too weak. The message was clear. Earth needed to be controlled before it became a real threat. Jake listened without expression. Around him, he could feel the weight of hostile attention from hundreds of alien representatives. They were all waiting to see how the human would respond to this coordinated attack. Finally, the Prime Arbiter called for Earth's response. Captain Morrison, you may address the concerns that have been raised. Jake stood and walked to the central platform. The chamber fell silent as every alien I focused on him. He looked calm and professional, exactly what they expected from a human diplomat. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Earth appreciates the opportunity to address these concerns. We've always sought peaceful cooperation with all galactic civilizations. Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. They had heard similar words from human diplomats many times before. However, Jake continued, I must correct a misunderstanding that seems to be common in this chamber. I paused and looked directly at Vexton and Gorthmal. Something in his expression made both aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. You seem to believe that humanity's diplomatic approach indicates weakness. You have mistaken our preference for peace as an inability to fight. Jake's voice remained calm, but there was something new in his tone, something that made the hair stand up on the back of Lisa's neck. This is a dangerous mistake, Vexton hissed, and started to rise from his seat. How dare you threaten this assembly, human? I'm not threatening anyone, Jake replied. I'm simply correcting a misunderstanding before it leads to unfortunate consequences. Gorthmal stood to his full height, towering over the other delegates. Perhaps the human needs a lesson in respect. The war speaker began moving toward the central platform, his claws extending from his massive hands. Around the chamber, other hostile delegates prepared to watch the destruction of Earth's representative. Jake waited calmly as the alien predator approached. His hands remained at his sides, his expression unchanged. To the watching aliens, he looked like prey about to be destroyed by a superior hunter. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Gorthmal reached the central platform and towered over. Jake, the Cronin war speaker, was 3 meters tall and weighed over 400 kilograms. His thick fur was dark brown with streaks of gray, and his claws were longer than human fingers. Scars covered his arms and face from countless battles. You speak of respect, little human, Gorthmal growled, but your species knows nothing of strength. You hide behind words while real warriors take action. Jake looked up at the massive alien without stepping back. Strength means different things to different species. Does it? A Gorthmal raised. One huge hand, claws gleaming under the chamber lights. Let me show you what strength means to the Cronin Empire. Claw swept down toward Jake's head. Around the chamber, alien delegates leaned forward to watch the human diplomat die. Some looked excited. Others appeared bored, as if they had seen this kind of execution many times before. Jake moved. His body shifted to the right just enough to let the deadly claws pass by his face. At the same time, his left hand came up and struck Gorthmal in a specific spot just below the ribs. The impact looked gentle, almost like a friendly pat. Gorthmal stopped moving. His eyes went wide with shock and pain. He tried to roar, but no sound came out. His massive legs buckled and he collapsed to the platform floor, conscious but unable to move. The chamber fell completely silent. Jake stood over the paralyzed war speaker. His expression calm and professional. He straightened his diplomatic robes and looked up at the stunned alien delegates. The Cronin nervous system has several vulnerable points, he said conversationally. A precise strike to the third intercostal nerve cluster causes temporary paralysis without permanent damage. Effect should wear off in about 6 hours. Vexen shot to his feet, his pale blue skin flushed with anger. What sorcery is this? Humans are weak, inferior. We prefer to think of ourselves as efficient, Jake replied. He walked around the paralyzed Cronin, like a teacher giving a lesson. Earth's diplomatic corps consists entirely of individuals with extensive military backgrounds. We found that people with combat experience were better suited for challenging assignments. Lisa, Kevin, and Amy stared at Jake with their mouths open. This was not the mild-mannered diplomat they had met that afternoon. This was something else entirely. Military background, Vexen repeated. You mean you were a soldier? Special operations? Jake corrected. 15th Ranger Battalion, Earth Defense Corps. 15 years of active service before I transferred to diplomatic duties. Several alien delegates began whispering to each other in their native languages. The words Jake could understand were not flattering to humanity, but there was something new in their voices now, something that had not been there before. Feared Vexen pulled a small weapon from inside his robes. The plasma pistol was barely larger than his hand, but Jake knew it could burn through steel plating. You think your primitive combat skills frighten us, human? We have weapons that can destroy your entire species. Zephyrian raised the pistol and aimed it at Jake's chest. His finger moved toward the trigger, confident that no human could possibly react fast enough to stop him. Jake was already moving before Vexen completed the thought. He covered the distance between them in 2 quick steps. His right hand grabbed the alien's wrist and twisted in a motion that looked almost casual. There was a wet snapping sound as bones broke. The plasma pistol flew across the chamber and shattered against the far wall. Vexen screamed and dropped to his knees, his ruined arm against his chest. Jake released him and stepped back, once again appearing completely calm. Violence in the council chamber is a serious breach of diplomatic protocol, Jake said to the assembly. I trust there will be no further violations. The Prime Arbiter finally found his voice. Captain Morrison, this is unprecedented. The Council has never witnessed such behavior from a diplomatic representative. Then the Council has been fortunate, Jake replied. In my experience, diplomacy works best when all parties understand the potential consequences of their actions. Round the chamber, alien delegates were reaching for communication devices, frantically trying to contact their home governance. Some were calling for security forces. Others seemed to be requesting immediate evacuation from the station. Jake watched their panic with professional interest. I should mention that Captain Ryan Foster, of the Earth Defense. The fleet is currently positioned 3 light minutes from this station. He has 12 heavy cruisers and orders to monitor our diplomatic mission closely. The Prime Arbiter is ancient. Face showed confusion. Our sensors detected no human ships in this system. That's correct, Jake agreed. You detected no human ships. The implication sank in slowly. If human warships were present, but undetectable, it meant Earth's technology was far more advanced than anyone had realized. It also meant that every alien government in the chamber was suddenly vulnerable to attack without warning. A new voice spoke from the chamber's communication system. The words were clear and calm with a slight accent that marked the speaker. As coming from Earth's North American continent, Nexus Prime Control. This is Captain Ryan Foster aboard the Earth Defense ship Liberty. We're reading some unusual energy signatures from your station. Is our diplomatic mission secure? The timing was perfect. Jake had not signaled for the communication, which meant Captain Foster was monitoring the situation independently. It also meant there really were human warships nearby, invisible to alien sensors, but ready to act if necessary. The Prime Arbiter looked around the chamber at the chaos Jake had created in less than 5 minutes. 2 of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy were injured and helpless. Dozens of other delegates were in various states of panic, and a human fleet was lurking somewhere nearby, undetected and potentially hostile. Captain Morrison, the Prime Arbiter, said carefully, perhaps we should discuss a more constructive approach to resolving our differences. Jake smiled, and several alien delegates moved back from that expression. It was not the polite smile of a diplomat. It was the smile of a predator who had just proven his dominance over lesser creatures. "I think that would be very productive, honored arbiter," Jake replied. "Earth has always preferred negotiation to conflict. But we insist on negotiating from a position of mutual respect." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many hostile delegates as possible. "I should probably mention that every human diplomat currently serving in alien space has a similar background to mine. We found that former soldiers make excellent ambassadors, especially in challenging environments." The revelation hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. Every human they had dismissed as weak and harmless was actually a trained killer. Every diplomatic mission they had threatened or attacked had been staffed by individuals capable of extreme violence. And if the human diplomats were all former military, what did that say about the humans who were still serving in their armed forces? Vexton tried to speak through his pain, but Jake's next words cut him off. "The Helix Nebula incident 3 years ago was instructive," Jake said conversationally. "Pirates backed by certain government forces had been attacking human shipping. It took our investigation team 6 months to track down everyone involved in the operation." Several delegates who had been present during discussions of the Helix incident began to look sick. That pirate network had simply vanished one day, along with everyone connected to it. Hundreds of ships and thousands of personnel had disappeared, without a trace. The interesting thing about that investigation, Jake continued, was how thoroughly the criminal organization was eliminated. Ships, bases, supply lines, command structure, financial backing, everything. It was almost like they had never existed at all. The chamber was now completely silent, except for Vexton's labored breathing and the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Every alien present was beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. They had not been dealing with a weak species that could be bullied into submission. They had been provoking something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Jake walked slowly around the central platform while the alien delegates watched in stunned silence. His movements were calm and controlled, like a teacher giving a lesson to students who had finally started paying attention. "The Centauri border. Wars were my first major assignment," he said, his voice carrying easily through the quiet chamber. 7 different alien species decided that human colonies were easy targets. They formed an alliance specifically to drive us out of the sector. Lisa watched Jake with growing amazement. The mild-mannered diplomat she had met that afternoon was gone, replaced by someone who radiated danger like heat from a fire. Kevin and Amy sat frozen in their seats, afraid to move or speak. "The operation lasted 14 months, Jake continued. "By the end, the alliance had been completely destroyed. No ships, no bases, no command structure. The survivors called it the Ghost Campaign because they never saw who was killing them." Several alien delegates were now frantically typing on their communication devices, trying to access historical records. The Centauri border wars were not classified information, but the details had never been fully released to the galactic community. "Led a team of 8 specialists," Jake said. "We infiltrated enemy territory and began systematic elimination of their military assets. It took time because we had to be careful not to harm civilian populations." The Helix Confederacy representative, a insect-like being called Clicktar, made a series of rapid clicking sounds that his translator rendered as panicked questions. 8 humans destroyed an alliance of 7 species. That is impossible." "Right." "Destroyed," Jake corrected. "Neutralized. There's a difference. We removed their ability to threaten human colonies, but we left their civilian populations untouched. Earth has very strict rules about collateral damage." The Prime Arbiter was studying Jake with new interest. "Captain Morrison, these campaigns you describe are not in any official records available to the Council." "Of course not," Jake replied. "Earth doesn't advertise its military operations. We prefer that other species see us as peaceful traders and explorers. It makes diplomacy easier when people don't know what we're capable of." Gorthmel was beginning to regain some feeling in his limbs. He tried to speak but could only manage a low growl. Jake glanced down at the paralyzed war speaker with what might have been sympathy. The Cronin gladiator pits were shut down 5 years ago, Jake said. Slavery is illegal under galactic law, but certain species thought humans would make interesting subjects for blood sport. The few Cronin delegates in the chamber looked at each other with growing horror. The gladiator pits had been a major source of income for their empire until they had suddenly and mysteriously ceased operations. 12 human civilians had been captured and forced to fight for alien entertainment, Jake continued. The rescue operation took 3 weeks. We extracted all 12 civilians and then addressed the broader problem. What broader problem? The Prime Arbiter asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. The entire gladiator industry, Jake said simply. Arena owners, fight promoters, slave traders, corrupt officials who allowed it to continue. The whole network.
8.
Paused and looked directly at the Cronin delegates. They were given one opportunity to release all their slaves and cease operations voluntarily. When they refused, we provided a more direct form of encouragement. Vexton had stopped whimpering and was listening with the rest of the chamber. His broken arm hung useless at his side, but his large black eyes were focused on Jake with a mixture of fear and fascination. The Zephyrian Trade Union lost a significant investment in that operation, Jake said, turning his attention to the injured alien. Several of your companies were providing financial backing for the gladiator pits. Vexen tried to speak but only managed a weak hiss. His species had been involved in dozens of illegal operations across the galaxy, always careful to maintain official distance from their criminal activities. We found extensive records during our investigation, Jake continued. Financial transfers, communication logs, transport schedules, very thorough documentation. Your people are excellent record keepers. The implication was clear. Earth had evidence of Zephyrian government involvement in slavery, piracy, and other illegal activities. That information could be released at any time, destroying their reputation in the galactic community. Captain Foster's voice crackled through the chamber's communication system again. Nexus Prime Control, we're detecting weapons charging on several alien ships near the station. Should we consider this a hostile action? The question sent panic through the alien delegates. If human ships could detect weapon signatures on their vessels, it meant Earth sensors were far more advanced than anyone had realized. It also meant the human fleet was close enough to respond to any aggressive action within minutes. Negative, Captain Foster, Jake replied calmly. Our diplomatic mission is proceeding normally. Please maintain your current position. Understood, Captain Morrison. We'll continue monitoring the situation. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Jake looked around at the alien faces staring at him and saw the exact moment. When they finally understood the truth, Earth had not been responding weakly to alien aggression because they were incapable of fighting back. They had been gathering intelligence, identifying threats, and preparing for exactly this moment. The attacks on human shipping over the past 6 months were very educational, Jake said. We now have detailed information about which species were involved, how their operations were organized, and who was providing support. He walked over to where Gorthmel lay paralyzed and looked down at the massive alien. The Cronin Empire provided weapons and ships. The Zephyrian Trade Union handled financing and logistics. 12 other species contributed personnel or allowed their territory to be used for staging areas. Kevin found his voice for the first time since the violence had started. You knew about all of this? Jake nodded. Earth intelligence has been tracking anti-human activities since our first contact with alien civilizations. We needed to identify which species could be trusted and which ones saw us as a threat to be eliminated. But why didn't you stop the attacks? Amy asked. Human crews died in those raids. Jake's expression darkened. Every human death was a tragedy. Stopping individual attacks would have driven the conspiracy underground. We needed to see the full scope of the threat before we could respond effectively. The Prime Arbiter was beginning to understand the implications of what Jake was saying. Captain Morrison, are you suggesting that Earth has been deliberately allowing these incidents to continue as part of some larger strategy? I'm saying that Earth takes a long-term view of galactic politics, Jake replied. We prefer to solve problems completely, rather than just treating symptoms. He looked around the chamber at the frightened alien delegates. Every species in this room that has taken hostile action against humanity is now known to us. We have detailed records of your operations, your leaders, your capabilities, and your weaknesses. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop as the full implications of Jake's words sank in. Earth had not been the helpless victim that everyone had believed. They had been the hunter, patiently studying their prey before deciding how to respond. The question now, Jake said quietly, is what happens next. Earth still prefers peaceful cooperation with all galactic civilizations. But we will no longer tolerate unprovoked attacks on our people or our interests. Vexton managed to speak through his pain. What do you want from us? Jake smiled, and once again, several delegates moved back from that expression. That's a very good question, High Counselor. Think we should discuss it. Jake walked to the center of the platform and faced the assembled alien delegates. The chamber was completely silent except for the soft sounds of injured aliens trying to recover from their encounters with human efficiency. Earth's position is simple, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. We want to be good neighbors. We're willing to trade technology, share resources, and work together on problems that affect the entire galaxy. Several alien delegates looked confused. After everything they had witnessed, they had expected threats and demands for surrender. However, Jake continued, we will not be bullied, threatened, or attacked. Today's demonstration was necessary because you confused our diplomatic courtesy with weakness. The Prime Arbiter leaned forward in his ancient chair. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Morrison? New agreements, Jake replied. Fair trade relationships that benefit everyone involved. Mutual defense pacts against real threats like pirates and raiders. Scientific cooperation on projects like disease research and environmental protection. Vexton struggled to his feet, still cradling his broken arm. And if we refuse these agreements, Jake's smile was cold and professional. Then Earth will pursue our interests through other means. We've already identified every species that has taken hostile action against us. We know where your leaders live, where your military bases are located, and how your economies function. He paused to let that information sink in. We also know which of your operations are legal under galactic law and which ones are not. Some of you have been very busy with activities that the Council would find interesting. Several delegates began whispering frantically to each other. The threat was clear. Earth had enough evidence to destroy the reputations and economies of multiple species through simple information. Disclosure. Gorthmal had regained enough movement to sit up. His voice was weak but filled with rage. You think you can threaten? The entire galaxy. Human. Not the entire galaxy, Jake corrected. Not just the parts that have declared themselves our enemies. The rest of you are welcome to join us in building a better future. Captain Foster's voice came through the communication system once more. Captain Morrison, we're detecting several alien ships powering up weapon systems. Do you require assistance? Question caused panic among the alien delegates. If human ships could monitor their weapons from long range, it meant they were completely vulnerable to surprise attack. Thank you, Captain Foster, but that won't be necessary, Jake replied calmly. I believe our hosts are beginning to understand the situation. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Jake looked around at the frightened alien faces and saw that his message had been received. Something, he said. Earth doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to destroy civilizations or conquer territory. We just want to be left alone to pursue our own development in peace. Lisa finally found her voice. Jake, what about the attacks on our shipping? What about the colonies that have been threatened? All of that stops now, Jake said firmly. Any further attacks on human civilians or military personnel will be considered acts of war. Any attempts to restrict human trade or expansion will be met with immediate retaliation. He turned to face the Prime Arbiter directly. Earth is willing to work within the existing council structure, but we will not be bound by decisions made without our input. From now on, any policies affecting humanity will require our consent. The ancient being who led the Galactic Council studied Jake, the eyes that had seen thousands of years of political maneuvering. Captain Morrison, what you're describing would fundamentally change the balance of power in galactic politics. Yes, Jake agreed. It would. The current system allows powerful species to prey on weaker ones without consequences. Earth intends to change that. Kevin spoke up from his seat behind Jake. What about the species that aren't involved in the attacks? What happens to them? Nothing changes for them, Jake replied. Peaceful species that want to trade and cooperate with humanity are welcome to do so. We have no quarrel with civilizations that mind their own business. Amy leaned forward. What about the ones that have been attacking us? What's their punishment? Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. The species that have taken hostile action against humanity will make full reparations for the damage they've caused. They will cease all aggressive activities immediately. They will provide guarantees that such attacks will never happen again. What kind of guarantees, Vexen? Asked Weekly. The kind that ensure compliance, Jake said simply. Earth will be establishing monitoring stations in key systems. Our ships will patrol trade routes to prevent piracy, and we will maintain the ability to respond quickly to any violations of the new agreements. The implications were staggering. Earth was essentially demanding the right to police large sections of galactic space. They were claiming authority that had never been granted to any single species. Gorthmal managed to stand up, though he was still unsteady on his feet. The Cronin Empire will never submit to human oversight. Jake looked at the massive alien with something that might have been pity. War Speaker, your empire has been attacking human shipping for 6 months. You've killed 17 civilian crew members and destroyed millions of credits worth of cargo. He walked closer to the injured Cronin. Earth has detailed records of every attack, including the ship registrations and crew assignments. We also have communication intercepts, proving that these were official military operations, not random piracy. Gorthmel's expression changed, from anger to fear as he realized what Jake was saying. The choice is simple, Jake continued. Accept the new agreements and pay appropriate compensation, or face the consequences of your actions. What consequences? Then the War Speaker asked. Though his voice suggested he already knew the answer, the kind that eliminate problems permanently. Jake said quietly. The chamber fell silent again as the weight of that statement settled over the alien delegates. They were beginning to understand that Earth had moved beyond diplomacy into something far more dangerous. The Prime Arbiter finally spoke. Captain Morrison, the Council will need time to consider these proposals. Of course, Jake agreed pleasantly. I have 24 hours to reach a decision. After that, Earth will begin implementing our policies unilaterally. He looked around the chamber one last time. I want to be clear about something. Earth prefers peace, but we are very good at war. The choice of which path to take is entirely up to you. Jake walked back to the human section and helped Lisa gather their diplomatic materials. Kevin and Amy followed in stunned silence, still trying to process what they had witnessed as they left the chamber. Alien delegates began frantically contacting their home governments. The balance of power in galactic politics had just shifted dramatically, and everyone needed to decide which side they wanted to be on. Outside in the corridor, Lisa finally found her voice. Jake, how many others like you are there in the diplomatic corps? Jake's smile was warm, but carried an edge that made her grateful they were allies. Every human diplomat you've ever met, Lisa. Earth doesn't send civilians to negotiate with predators. The revised agreements signed the next day established humanity as the dominant military power in their region of space. Trade concessions, territorial guarantees, and mutual defense pacts exceeded Earth's most optimistic projections. More importantly, they established humanity's reputation as a species that preferred peace but was unmatched in their capacity for strategic violence. As Jake's shuttle departed Nexus Prime, he reviewed intelligence reports about potential threats. In other sectors of the galaxy, the diplomatic mission was complete, but Captain Jake Morrison's work was far from over. In a universe full of predators, humanity had made it clear they were the apex species.